Hello and welcome to Nithrania YouTube channel. My name is Branislav Berec and you're watching another episode of the Game in a Nutshell series designed for explaining the board game rules. Today we have the third game from the West Kingdom trilogy called Viscounts of the West Kingdom. So after Architects, Paladins, we now have the Viscounts. The name on the box looks slightly different because I have the Czech language edition, but again the game is completely language independent, so let's take a look at how this game is played. To set the game up, assemble these 5 segments in a random order, but make sure each segment is with the correct side up, considering the number of players in the game. Then place the castle in the middle, locking down all the segments together. The orientation of the castle should be random as well, however these cardboard pieces, when you assemble the castle for the first time, have to be placed in this particular order. Then take these 5 manuscripts with grey background. They form the basis for 5 piles, and then place 6 random manuscripts with the black background on top of that grey tile. Place these piles randomly on these manuscript spaces on the game board. However, when you do that, flip the tiles upside down so that the tile with the grey background is actually on top. Although all these tiles are now face up, only the topmost tile of each pile is actually a public knowledge. Shuffle all the neutral townsfolk cards, those are the cards with the dark grey background behind their names, and separate them into 5 roughly equal piles. Now again, place these piles face up on the designated spaces on the game board. So when you're done, this is how the main board may look like. Then each player takes a player board and make sure you use this side of the player board. The other side is used for a solo play. Then place 3 workshops to these spaces on the player board, 3 trading posts to these spaces, and 3 guild halls to these spaces. Then take 20 workers of the same color, 1 Viscount, and 8 starting townfolk cards in the same color. Randomly determine the starting player, and that player will take the starting player token. Finally, place the virtue marker on this space and the corruption marker on this one. Take all the player cards and the hero cards. Heroes have brown background behind their names. Shuffle each deck separately and deal out as many player cards as there are players in the game plus 1, so in a 3-player game 4 cards, and the same number of hero cards, creating the pairs. Now if this is the player order, then in the reverse player order, so in this case starting with red player, then yellow and blue, each player picks 1 pair. You may not take cards from different pairs, players always have to take the created pair. Then, first of all, place your Viscount on this space on the game board. That's the starting space for your Viscount. Note that these numbers don't really have to be in the exact order, since these segments, board segments, have been placed randomly. Then take all the starting resources and coins and cards, and resolve all the effects which are at the bottom of the card. In this case, the dead card can be immediately flipped and the player can gain any resource. All those effects are explained at the end of the rulebook, but for the sake of clarification, when you have a card number 3, 5 or 6, you can take these effects anywhere on the game board. However, the effect of the card number 8, placing a free trading post, can only be done on the space with the same number, so at the current position of your Viscount. So after resolving the player card, you can flip it to the other side and it can act as a help card for the rest of the game. Then shuffle the hero card with your 8 starting townsfolk cards, create your draw deck, and draw first 3 cards into your hand. Keep those cards secret from other players. Then take these poverty and the prosperity cards and based on the number of players in the game, which is 3 in our case, place the corresponding number of dead cards and here the deed cards on top of these cards. So here I have 15 dead cards and here 16 deed cards. Then place all the remaining dead and deed cards underneath their respective piles. The game is played in series of rounds, starting with the first player and then continuing in a clockwise direction. On your turn, you will follow this sequence printed on your player board. First phase is the card management phase. First of all, you will slide the card which is on the right side of your player board to the discard pile, then slide all other cards to the right, and then you will add one of your cards from your hand to the first position on the player board. These icons in the top right corner of each card are important for the primary action in the step 3. Then in the second step you will perform movement of your Viscount based on this number on the card you have just inserted. Viscounts move along these roads, but they have to follow these arrows. Then the position of your Viscount determines your option for the primary action. So in the third step you will perform one of these 4 primary actions, and you will perform that action at the location of your Viscount. In order to perform the action, you will use these icons on your player board, and not just on the cards, but also when you unlock these kind of spaces. You will also use resources and coins, and potentially also the icons on the Townsfolk card which is adjacent to your Viscount. With this first action, the trade action, you will gain resources, coins, you can optimize your deck, and you can flip your dead and deed cards. With the second action, the construct action, you can construct one of your buildings. With the third action, you can place your workers to the castle. On their way, they will give you some benefits, and at the end of the game, all workers in the castle will score victory points. And with this fourth action, you can transcribe one of these manuscripts. Then, after performing the primary actions, during the next step, you may hire a Townsfolk card adjacent to your Viscount. Then, in this fifth step, if these virtue and corruption markers will collide, that means if they would be in the same space, you would resolve these effects and reset their position. And then in the final step of your turn, you will draw new cards up to your hand limit, which is 3 at the start of the game, but it may be increased over the course of the game. When one of this poverty card or prosperity card would be revealed, that means all those cards on top of that card will be taken by players, you will finish the current round and complete one more round starting with the first player, and then the game would be over. You will score victory points all over the place. You will score points for all your constructed buildings, for your workers in the castle, for all transcribed manuscripts, and if this card would be revealed, then players will score all their flipped dead cards, and similarly, if this card would be revealed, players will also score their flipped deed cards. I will describe the scoring in more detail later in the video. In this section of the video, we'll go through all these steps in more detail, and we will start with the first phase, card management. On your first turn, you simply take one of the cards from your hand and add it to the first spot on your player board. This silver coin value indicates the movement of your Viscount in the next step, and these icons in the top left corner are important for your actions in the third step. On your first turn, you can also use these pre-printed icons since you don't have any cards in those spaces. On your subsequent turns, first slide the cards to the right, so from this position the card is discarded, and if it has this symbol, carry out this effect immediately. And again, choose one more card from your hand and add it to the leftmost position on your player board. Now, if the card you insert has any flash symbol, that indicates the immediate effect, and you can immediately carry out that effect. You can find the description of all those symbols at the back of the rulebook. If the card has this symbol, its effect is active while the card is on your player board. If your newly inserted card has one or more of these criminal symbols, count all your criminal symbols on your player board and then move your corruption markers that many spaces to the right. At the start of this first step, if for any reason you wouldn't have any cards in your hand, you have to use the topmost card from your draw deck. It can also happen during the game that you end up with only 3 cards. You may never have fewer than 3 cards. Then during this first step, you drop off the rightmost card, then slide all other cards, then you have to shuffle your discard pile, then draw the new card and add it to the leftmost position. The second step is the movement step. Look at this number in the top left corner, this silver coin value, and then you must move your Viscount by that many spaces on this main board. When you move, you must move along these arrows. So when you get over here, you may never move back this way, unless there is a card which allows you to do so. You must move this number of spaces. You may never move fewer spaces. However, for each additional silver coin you spend, you can move one additional space. Now, if you end your movement on the same space as another Viscount, as also indicated on your player help card, the other player may freely rearrange their card on their player board. So not you, it is the other player. In the third step, you will take one of these 4 primary actions. You may only choose one of them, and you may choose Trade, Construct, Send workers to the castle, and Transcribe the Manuscript. To perform those actions, let's say this Construct action, you have to use the matching icon anywhere on your player board. So if this building would be already constructed, in addition to this one, you can also use this icon. Then you can also use the matching resources. In this case, it would be stone. And don't forget that these criminal icons are wild icons, so they can be used as any other icon. And if this neutral townfolk card adjacent to your Viscount has the same icon as your current action, you can dismiss that card by paying the indicated cost, in this case 1 silver. You can use that icon, in our case the hammer, for your action, but you have to resolve this effect in the top right corner. Then the card is completely removed from the game. You can only dismiss the card which has the same icon as the action you are taking. You can dismiss maximum 1 card per turn, and these abilities at the bottom of the card have no effect. When you take this trade action, to pay for the action you can use these blue trade icons or blue purses. You can use these criminal icons, and you can use coins. Obviously, you can also dismiss the townsfolk card which is adjacent to your Viscount if it has the corresponding icon. Now, you can only perform this trade action if your Viscount is on the outside path. And you can only perform it at the location of your Viscount. So in this case I can use 2 trade icons and gain 1 stone. This can be done repeatedly. In this location or over here you can trade icons for coins, and so on and so forth. When you trade 2 trade icons for 1 resource, if you only have 1 icon, you gain nothing. When you take this construct action, you can use hammers, you can use the stone, you can also use the criminal icons and the townsfolk card next to your Viscount. Again, you can only construct the building in one of the available spaces adjacent to your Viscount, so you can only do it when you are on the outside path. Those available slots range from the edge of the segment to the river which is in the middle of each segment. So this Viscount has these 3 slots available. The construction slot must be empty, so in this example only these slots would be available for this Viscount. The cost of the action depends on what building you want to construct. To construct the workshop you need 3 icons. Remember, you can always use stone instead of the hammer. To build the trading post you need 5 icons, and to build the guild hall you need 7. Then after constructing the building you take the reward which is printed on the construction space, and if it is linked to any other building which is already constructed, both you and the other player get the reward shown in the middle between these buildings. When you construct a building and both ends of the link are occupied by your color, you only get this reward once. In addition, each building you build reveals additional permanent bonuses. The first bonus is associated with movement, and when you move your Viscount, you don't have to, but you may move him 1 additional space for free. With the second bonus, you only need to pay 1 coin when you dismiss a neutral townsfolk card adjacent to your Viscount. Normally you would have to pay this cost, but with that bonus you only pay 1 coin. Then these 4 spaces provide additional permanent icons on your player board. So when playing the trade action, In addition to these two icons, I can also use these two icons plus the criminal and so on and so forth. Next bonus allows you to discard one card from your hand or your draw pile anytime you recruit a new townsfolk card. Next bonus only applies when both the corruption and the virtue markers collide, so they are in the same space, and in case you would have no criminals on your player board, you would be able to move your virtue marker one space to the left. And the last bonus increases your hand limit by 1. With this place workers action, you may place these workers in the castle. You can only perform this action when your Viscount is on this inside path. As indicated over here, you need 1, 3, 5 or 8 symbols, and you can place 1, 2, 3 and 4 workers respectively. You can use these noble icons and criminal icons, you can use gold and potentially the townsfolk card adjacent to your Viscount. When placing these workers, you always place them in this tier 1 of the castle, and it's the location adjacent to your Viscount. So in our example, both workers would be placed over here. Now, if you have 3 or more workers in one section, you move one of those workers to the next tier, tier 2, and as these arrows indicate, you move one of them to the left and one of them to the right. When you move your worker to the second tier, immediately resolve the corresponding effect. Then if you still have 3 or more workers in any other tier 1 section, resolve it in the same way. Then if you would have 3 or more workers in any tier 2 section, move one of them to the tier 3 and gain one resource of your choice immediately. Since there are no arrows here, you don't move these workers to the right and to the left. So those 2 workers stay in the same section and provide easy and fast way to the third tier. Then when you're done with your movement, check if there are any sections in tier 1 or tier 2 with 4 or more workers in total, regardless of the color. We don't have such a situation here, but let's say we would have 4 workers in this section. If it happens, the active player must bump off some of those workers so that only 3 workers remain in that section. You may bump off any worker, even your own one. Now, looking at your player 8 card, the player whose worker would be bumped off the first tier would get 2 silver coins as a compensation. If the worker would be bumped off the second tier, the player would get 1 virtue and 1 resource of their choice. However, from tier 3 there is no bump off, all workers stay here, and at the end of the game the workers in the tier 3 would score 3 victory points, workers from the second tier would score 2 victory points, and the workers from the first tier would score 1 victory point for their respective owners. Finally, the player who gains the majority in this tier 3 will get this castle leader card, which is worth 5 victory points at the end of the game, and the owner increases the hand limit by 1. In this situation, the owner would be red player. To gain the card from the red player, other player would have to have the majority, so let's say the blue player would have 3 workers there. Now the card would belong to blue player. And finally, when you take this 4th action, you can transcribe a manuscript, and you can only transcribe a manuscript which is adjacent to your Viscount, which means you can only take this action when you are on this inside path. You can transcribe maximum 1 manuscript per turn. You can use these cleric icons, you can use inkwells, and you can also use the criminal icons. You need as many as depicted on that manuscript, so in this case 3. When you do, you can take that manuscript, keep it somewhere next to your player board, and if it has any immediate effect, you may resolve that effect right now. If the manuscript pile would run out, don't refill it. You can still use the pre-printed manuscript, at least for its immediate effect. Manuscripts come in 4 different colors: gray, black, blue and yellow, and at the end of the game you will score victory points based on each set you collect. In addition, the first player who collects 3 manuscripts of one color takes the bonus cleric card, which awards 3 victory points at the end of the game and provides ongoing effect for that player. In the 4th step of your turn, you can recruit a new townsfolk card. You can recruit maximum 1 card per turn, and you can only recruit the Townsfall card adjacent to your Viscount, so from the same segment as your Viscount. To recruit a card, you have to pay the indicated cost, and you immediately perform this indicated effect. Then take the card and place it to your discard pile. If the pile of cards runs out, again, don't refill that pile. You can still use this effect after paying this cost. You resolve this 5th step only when the virtue and the corruption marker are in the same space. If they're not, skip the 5th step and proceed to 6th step. Anytime you gain this symbol, you gain corruption, and that means you have to move the corruption marker 1 space to the right. Similarly, when you gain virtue, you move your virtue marker 1 space to the left. If you would gain both at the same time, move the corruption first and virtue second. When they collide, as of that moment, those markers will move together. So if you would gain virtue now, you move both markers 1 space to the left. Now, when resolving the 5th step, when both markers are in the same position, all players who have this bonus unlocked, so not just the active player, but all players who have it unlocked, if they have no criminal icons on their player board, they would gain 1 virtue. Then all players, not just the active player, but all players resolve these effects which are activated during any collision. Then based on the position of the corruption and virtue marker, the active player gains all the items listed over here, and all other players gain the items over here. Then only the active player resets the position of both markers. And finally, in the 6th step, draw cards until you reach your hand limit. Normally, the hand limit is 3, but it can be increased by card effects. If for any reason you would be already above your hand limit at the moment, you would not draw any cards, but you don't have to discard. Now, when you need to draw the cards and you have no cards in your draw pile, you have to shuffle your discard pile and create the new draw pile. Every time you do that, if you have any criminals on your board, you gain 1 corruption. Regardless of the number of those criminal icons, if you have at least 1, you gain 1 corruption. If you wouldn't have any criminals, instead you would gain 1 virtue. If due to this movement, corruption and virtue markers would collide, nothing happens because we are in the step 6, and only in the step 5 of your next turn you would resolve that collision. One thing that I want to point out is that you may also shuffle your discard pile with your draw pile even after this type of card effect. Even when you perform this effect, you have to check the criminals on your player board and move the corruption or virtue marker. Anytime you have to take a dead card or a deed card, take them from these piles and place them same side up somewhere next to your player board. When you flip them, the dead card gives you 1 resource of your choice, and when you flip the deed card, it gives you 3 victory points instead of 1. Then, when one of these cards, either the poverty card or the prosperity card, will be revealed, finish the current round, and then starting with the first player, each player will take 1 more final round, and then the game will be over. That revealed card will also be scored. Now, players can continue taking more deaths or more deeds, and it may happen that even the other card will be revealed. In that case, both of those cards will be scored. Then proceed to final scoring. When scoring constructed buildings, you will get this number of victory points based on how many buildings of that type you have built. So in this case, it is 9 victory points for workshops, only 4 victory points for 1 trading post, and 13 victory points for 2 guild halls. Then each worker in this tier 3 of the castle will score 3 victory points. Each worker from the second tier, tier 2, will score 2 victory points, and workers from tier 1 will score 1 victory point. So blue player would have 9 victory points for these workers, 8 victory points for these 4 workers, and 3 victory points for these 3 ones. Then score the victory points from your manuscripts. You will score sets of manuscripts of different colors. If you have a set of 4 manuscripts of 4 different colors, you will get 4 times 4, 16 victory points. Then if you have a set of 3 manuscripts with 3 different colors, you will score 3 times 3, 9 victory points. Similarly, if you would have a set of 2 different colors, you would have 2 times 2, 4 victory points, and for 1 manuscript in a set, it would be 1 victory point. So in this example, this would be 16 plus 9 plus 1 and 1 victory point. In addition, add the victory points from any bonus cleric cards, and some of those manuscripts also score victory points based on specific conditions. So add those victory points as well. Then when this poverty or prosperity card would be revealed, players would also score victory points for the most flipped cards of the other type. So if this prosperity card would be revealed, the player with the most flipped dead cards will receive 12 victory points, the second player 8 and the third player 4 victory points. Similarly, when the poverty card will be flipped, it works in the exact same way, however, it counts the number of deed cards which are flipped. In 2-player games, skip those middle values, so the first player will score 12 victory points and the second player will score 4 victory points. Then, regardless whether these cards are revealed or not, players score negative or positive victory points from their dead cards and deed cards. Finally, don't forget to score 5 victory points from the Castle Leader card, and the player with the most points is the winner. So that's it, that's how you play Viscounts of the West Kingdom. If you would have any questions, I'd be happy to answer your questions. If you like the show, if you like the series, please subscribe. You can even support the channel on our Patreon page. My name is Branislav Berec, you've been watching Game in a Nutshell, and hope to see you next time.